Hey buddy, every time I mention plant medicine in my previous videos, I get a whole slew of comments of people asking me to expand on that and to explain what I mean. So I decided to make an entire video dedicated to that topic. Long story short, the first thing I'm going to say is when I say plant medicine, I typically mean either ayahuasca, mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, or at this point, cannabis, specifically edibles, because I don't really do anything that could potentially have negative effects on my health. So I don't drink alcohol, I don't smoke anything. At this stage in my life, I have such a reverence for these medicines, and I call them medicines because I believe that that's exactly what they are. They grow from the earth. I believe that they are put here to open our eyes to certain aspects of reality and consciousness that are difficult to see on our own. Do I believe that everybody needs to partake of these plant medicines? Not at all. I think there are certain people that feel a calling towards these plant medicines. And if that's you, I would first encourage you to take your time. Don't jump into it. These are very powerful compounds, and they are also illegal in a lot of countries. So by no means in this video am I encouraging you to break the law of your country. There are ways around it where you could do it safely and legally, and we'll get into that. The first thing I want to do is start with a story of my first psychedelic mystical experience that I ever had, and it wasn't even from taking plant medicine. It was completely accidental, doing a certain kind of breath work, and I had no idea that this was even possible at the time. This is back in 2018. I was still married at the time. This is before my son was born, and I had discovered the Wim Hof method. I started taking cold showers, dipping my toe in the idea of cold plunges, and Wim Hof had a very specific type of breathing. I realize now that his breath work is a form of fire breathing, which is a type of breath work that is known in a lot of spiritual communities, a lot of different religions. I was just doing this breathing exercise because it was supposed to help you with your relaxation. It was supposed to make cold exposure a little bit easier. And I remember I was upstairs in my studio doing this breath work when all of a sudden I unexpectedly reached an altered state of consciousness. I felt one with everything. There was a bright light. It kind of felt like a near-death experience. My story, the character of Ryan, for a very short period of time disappeared. Apparently it was only like 10 minutes, but even the perception of time went away completely. My physical body was still there, but I was observing it from a different plane of consciousness, and all of these emotions started coming to the surface within my body. I started weeping like a little kid. All of these wounds from my past and subconscious were coming to the surface, and essentially I was being healed of certain things, and I didn't realize it at the time. When I snapped out of it, I just had all this peace. I had this feeling of oneness. I felt very connected to God, and this was the first experience I had ever had of experiencing God as everything, which was kind of scary for me at the time because I was raised in a really Christian home. I had still completely identified as a fundamentalist Christian. So the idea that everything was God, including myself, seemed blasphemous and scary and counter to every belief that I was ingrained and grew up with. I went downstairs and my wife at the time asked me what the fuck I was doing because she heard all these weird noises and stuff going on. And I just told her, I don't know, but I feel like love. Like everything is okay and everything is love, essentially. At this time, I had no experience with psychedelics or plant medicines, and I didn't even know that this was the kind of experience that a lot of people reported taking these plant medicines. This was the closest thing that I had ever experienced of some kind of encounter with the divine that was objective. There's a saying, I'm probably gonna butcher it, but it's something along the lines of religion is believing in someone else's experience of the divine, and spirituality is believing in your own experience of the divine. And this was the first time that ever happened. From this experience, it's when I started questioning everything. The idea of hell, the idea of heaven, the idea that people that didn't believe in the same religion as me, they weren't going to heaven. All of the theology, all of the beliefs I was raised with, I started challenging and questioning all of them. I lost certain friends, Certain families stop speaking to me. But when you have an objective spiritual experience, you can't just pretend like it didn't happen. So this is back in the end of 2018. Fast forward years later, my marriage fell apart. It felt like my 20-year music career was stagnating and also falling apart. I was in a pretty dark place, but then all these synchronicities kept popping up, and I just felt this desire and this urge to start exploring mushrooms. Psilocybin is still illegal where I live, so I'm not encouraging you to do what I did. But a couple years ago, I got a hold of some mushrooms and I just started going down the rabbit trail and easing into that world of psychedelics. I made a video of the biggest heroic dose of mushrooms that I took. I have documented audio, and I had sort of like a channeling experience. I have a lot more understanding now of what that experience was than at the time that I made the video. But if you want, you can check that out. It's titled 8.5 gram mushroom trip, multiple personalities. If you are new to your healing journey, your spiritual journey, you're still dealing with a lot of trauma, and you just kind of started down that path, then I really don't recommend jumping into psychedelics. I can honestly say that I had already done a lot of work when it came to facing my own demons of the past, my own traumas, seeking to know myself on a deep level. So when I started taking this plant medicine, I could recognize some of the darkness that was coming to the surface. I could see that it wasn't some separate entity, but it was my own inner wounds that I had never faced, that I had never dealt with, and that it was literally the definition of what Carl Jung calls the shadow. Repressed pain, repressed darkness. Plant medicine can just be a tool to help you go deeper into your subconscious. I believe that within the next 5 years or so, it's going to be legal in a lot more places. Especially now, there are so many studies that have come out of how it's helped people quit addictions, heal trauma, and a host of all kinds of incredible things. In a lot of countries now, it's actually being recognized as medicine. It's being used in therapeutic settings to help people deal with trauma. What's crazy to me is here in the US during the time of Nixon, they just lumped it into the same category as other drugs that completely destroy the mind and the body, comparing mushrooms to things like meth and heroin. If you haven't noticed, in this life, people fear what they do not understand. And when this label was just slapped on this medicine all those years ago, there was little to no effort put in to understand what it actually is. And I believe that it has been put here as a guide to help those who are seeking. But again, if you are new to seeking, then don't worry about it. I was at a point in my life where I had never really had any kind of direct experience with the divine, other than that Wim Hof experience. And once I had these experiences with mushrooms, I haven't really felt the urge to go back, because now I have this knowing. It connected a lot of the dots that I needed connecting. And since then, I actually have quite a bit of mystical and spiritual experiences on a regular basis just through meditation. It revealed to me these higher levels of consciousness, and it showed me what was possible. It also did this strange thing where now cannabis, for whatever reason, feels like a mushroom trip to me now. It's legal here. I eat these gummies. I eat a gummy and a half. It comes out to about 7.5 grams of THC. I don't use it recreationally. I don't consume media. I don't watch TV. Whenever I take cannabis as an edible, I sit down and I meditate oftentimes anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. And to be honest with you, when I take it, that's really all I want to do, because it gets me more in touch with my higher self, the divine. And I get these downloads. I get answers to lifelong existential questions. So again, these types of plant medicine aren't your salvation, but they can certainly help you. A little nugget that I want to put in here for anyone who's a spiritual seeker. I recently came across the books Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And whenever I read this book, I honestly can tell that it's the exact same force, energy, whatever you want to call it, that I feel tapped into whenever I meditate now. I ask very specific questions and I get these very satisfying answers. Religion is the belief in God, but there is a certain spirituality that exists when you have your own objective experiences, when you have an actual knowing. And even Carl Jung talked about this. Later in his life, when he was asked, like, do you believe in God? He just looked at them and said, I don't believe, I know.
You now believe in God?
Now?
difficult to answer. I know. I don't need to believe. I know.
And so that is possible. And sometimes what psychedelics can do, they can take your faith and turn it into knowing. Because once I got to a certain point in my life, to be honest with you, faith simply was not enough. I needed a burning bush moment. I needed a tangible experience with the divine that I couldn't argue with. I realized that this is what Terence McKenna went on and on about throughout his whole life.
And so the church downplayed the operational role that plants had in inducing these states, because after all, if the devil cannot lead you astray without the use of plants, why, what kind of devil is it? So in our own historical tradition, there is a curious blindness to the efficacy of hallucinogenic plants.
So this is what I mean when in my past videos I've said plant medicine. It has drastically helped me. Once I've had those experiences, it's something that I've been able to honestly let go of and just look at and have reverence for and see it as a tool. There is a solution if this is illegal in your country. It's not an easy or a cheap solution, but there are retreat centers in other countries. Usually they're several $1,000s, but there are safe places out there that are created to be facilitators for those who are trying to do deeper inner healing through plant medicine like ayahuasca and mushrooms. There's a place out in Costa Rica, it's called Reunion. I'll put a link in the description if you're someone who happens to be watching this who has money to throw around. Unfortunately, right now, those are the only places that facilitate a safe and legal way to explore these compounds. There's a lot of things that we don't understand, but I do know that up until that point in my life, I always judged these substances and just called them drugs because I was afraid. Again, we fear what we do not understand. But I'm just making this video because I think back then this would help me. This video isn't to encourage you to do this, but just to give you a little bit more understanding and hopefully a different perspective. One final thing I'll mention is, if you enjoy these types of topics, consider joining the Conscious Men community. It's a community just for men. We talk about all kinds of things, psychedelics being one of them. It's just a community of like-minded men who are eager to grow in their spiritual journey, their physical journey, and mental health journey. Link in the description. You are loved, you matter, and you've barely scratched the surface of what you're capable of. I'll talk to you soon.